Hey guys, John Davis, the corporate action hero here, and in full transparency, I have to say to you that my guest today, when we first met, we were both wearing tights. Try not to visualize.
Yeah, don't
When I first met
don't
John
visualize it.
Verrico, when I first met John Verrico all those years ago, I was working at the Maryland Renaissance Festival, and John was working as a vendor at the festival, and I walked into a booth looking for a hat. That's how I met John Verrico. And I walked into the booth, and John and his lovely wife were in the booth, and you walked into the booth, and the first thing you immediately felt when you walked into that booth was, this place is just fun. And, they had beautiful things on the wall, and they had hats, and it was all beautiful stuff. But that atmosphere was created by John and his wife. And so much so, how you walk into a shop and you buy something and it's a cool place, so you always want to go back to that place. I would stop by that place all the time, just walk in, look at the hats, and talk to John and his lovely wife. And so one of the things about that is my good friend Dan Thurman. He one time said to me, he says, "You never know who's in your audience." And I had no idea that this guy who stood in front of me with that big smile, who always made you feel good about yourself, was actually an expert in communication and leadership. And this guy was one of those guys who's had like a real job in the real world, doing real things, as opposed to just wearing tights and living in the woods. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to introduce you to John Verrico. So hello, John, and welcome.
How you doing, John? Great to see you.
Good to see you as well. Why don't you tell us about what it is you do and what it is you are hoping to achieve with what you do?
At the risk of sounding trite, I'm trying to help create a better world where we just all get along. My whole focus is to help people communicate better. Whether it's in the work environment or one-to-one in society, just helping people to communicate better, to treat each other better. I come from, you may not know this about my background, but before I became the double X Adonis that I've grown into here, I was a small kid. I was an undersized kid. I was 5'3", weighed 110 pounds when I graduated high school. So I was picked on by bullies, and I know what it's like to feel like you don't matter, right? Or feel like being a target. Well, I don't want other people to ever feel the way I did when I was a kid.
Right.
So my goal is to try to help people feel like they matter. Plain and simple.
That's amazing. Is it, you and I do have a very similar story in the fact when I was in high school, I was a 265-pound kid and a complete introvert because I was heavy some of the time I was very, very young. It wasn't until I get out of high school and got into martial arts that I started losing weight and becoming, having this rock hard masculine body that I have. But
You became dangerous is what
I
happened.
became dangerous, man. A fight director, stunt guy, all this stuff. But what's really interesting is you're talking about how you want to change the world, make the world better, and that's apparent. When I walked into those booths, even all those years ago, I think that's part of your core, who you are. Do you believe that the work that you're doing now is just a personal core element of who you are?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't do stuff if I didn't believe in it.
Right.
And I'm just about making people feel good about themselves, which is why when I worked at the Renaissance Festival, I worked in a hat shop and I sold people hats. And if you recall, instead of trying to be an actor, and I had done some stage stuff, but not at Renfest. When I did Renfest, I worked in the hat shop. And if you recall, I never let anybody walk out of there with a hat that didn't make them look good.
Right.
They had to go with their style. They had to be able to carry it off, and that was, I cared. If they walked out there and looked like a goof, unless they were intentionally trying to look like a goof, like with a jester hat or whatever, that's a whole other story,
When I first met you, I think I was playing Cyril the Chicken Heart, and Cyril had a big goofy hat.
Wait,
and
you mean this guy right here?
Oh yeah, that's me. Oh, that's a long time ago, right? Well, Cyril had a big goofy hat. Well, it was the next year I stopped being Cyril the Chicken Heart and I became Sir Nigel Hack, the poofy sort of uppity. And I walked in your shop, man. I walked out of there with a big old velvet hat, big old red velvet hat. Wore that hat for years. Wore that out and went back and got another one, and was devoted to that shop. But I have to tell you, being devoted to that shop was not because of the hat. It was devoted because when I would go by, I would visit that shop all the time. I didn't buy that many hats from you, but I would visit you and your wife, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and what's interesting about that is you
We were like, will you
communicate
buy something already?
of no doubt in my mind.
Comes in, takes up all our time, man. It just wants to BS all the time. It doesn't want to buy anything. I'm kidding.
But it's you created an atmosphere, and as far as communications is concerned, I mean, there's many forms of communication, and the atmosphere you created had a lot to do with your body, your physical communication. But I mean, when you do your corporate work and you go out and you talk to organizations, do you talk about the various different kinds of communication?
Oh, of course. You have to talk about the basics and the science of communicating, and not just the words are only a minor 6% of what it is you're actually communicating. It really has to do with your body language and your paralanguage. I don't know if you're familiar with paralanguage.
No, not at all. What's that?
So it's one of those interesting expressions. Like I could say to you, hey John, you look nice today.
Mm.
Or I could say to you, hey, John, you look nice today.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Or I could say, hey, John, you look nice today.
Oh, you made me feel dirty just then.
Yeah. Or I could say, hey, John, you look nice today.
Oh, yeah.
So
wow.
It was just a matter of inflection, right? Where it's the same 4 words, but they had completely different meanings. So that's what paralanguage is. It's how you put your inflections and what syllable you put the emphasis on.
Syllable. That's a lot like in neurolinguistics. Embedded commands. Do you know anything about embedded commands?
I've heard of them.
Okay, so in embedded commands, well, it's just like the inflection you said. In neurolinguistics, we talk about. Do you want to go inside right now? And it's that drop and that go inside right now that gives them an order, basically.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it sounds like you're being polite and asking, but it was not a question. Yeah.
Right.
I got that from Mom all the
time. Nice. So when you're dealing with a customer or client and you're out there and you're speaking, what is your main topic? What is the main thing you talk about?
A couple of different things, but the principal topic is motivational leadership.
Okay.
When I talk about communication and how we improve communication, it's all about how you're making other people feel, right? And if you're in a leadership position, or even if you're not in a leadership position, because you have influence around you, and we all do, and it's how you treat other people to decide whether or not they feel motivated. And just like that, the whole concept of do you feel like going inside now? It's the same basic concept, right? It's how you communicate, it's how you make people feel about themselves. And so the whole concept behind motivational leadership, I mean, there's 3 basic principles to motivation, right? The first thing is that all people are motivated. You may not think so. You may know some people who really look like slackers and don't feel like but they're motivated. They're just not motivated to do what we want them to do, right? The second thing is that you can't force somebody else. You can't motivate other people. Now, for a motivational speaker, I know it sounds weird to say, but we can't motivate other people because motivation is personal. It comes from inside.
Right.
So all we can do is kind of create an environment that'll help these people to motivate themselves.
Right.
And then the third thing is that people do things for their own reasons and not for yours. And so understanding those principles, especially if you're a boss or a supervisor or whatever, and you're trying to get your workforce to do certain things, you have to know all of this about motivation. So you have to create an environment that will enable people to motivate themselves.
Right. And you have to find their individual purpose. For instance, when I go and I do my speeches, I'll ask my audiences flat out. I'll say, what is your favorite, what is the most important thing in your life? What is the most important thing in your life? I have never heard one person in my audience say my job.
Yeah.
What I've heard is my family. Always number one, family, health, security comes in there, but then it's job is not in the top 10 usually. And what I always talk when I'm talking to my clients, I'm always talking about how you have to find their purpose. Sounds like you're saying the exact same thing, is you got to find their purpose, not yours, and
That's
then empower it.
exactly right there. Exactly right there. Did you ever see that thing with the rocks and the sand? Where you take like a jar and you start putting rocks in, you put these big rocks in and you fill it up. You can't get any more big rocks in, and you go, okay, this jar is full. And then you take some tiny pebbles and you pour the pebbles in, and they fit in around the rocks and they start to fill the jar up again. So now the jar is full again. You can't get anything else in there. You go, this jar is full. Well, then you pour some sand in, and it finds its way and trickles down, and the thing fills up yet again. And you realize that you can keep stuffing more and more stuff in and keep filling this up. But if you were to start with the sand and fill that jar up, the other pebbles and the larger rocks would never fit.
Right.
And so the concept behind that whole thing is that those big rocks are the important things in your life, your family, your health, all the things that you just talked about. The pebbles are the necessaries, the things that you kind of have to have, a job, a car, whatever. The sand is all the other trivial stuff, right? It's how much time you spend on Facebook or whatever. It's all the trivial, time-consuming things that we do. And it's just a matter of put those big rocks in first. You can make room for other stuff, but pay attention to those most important things, those big rocks. And so as a leader, you need to know what your employees' big rocks are. And even your own person, when I teach balance to people, it's the same focus. What are your big rocks?
Right.
Focus on those, get those in place first, and all the other stuff you fit in whatever you can, and it really doesn't matter.
Wow. Yeah. That's exactly what I believe. I believe that you have to get focused on what's important, and realize that when you are a leader, especially, that what's important to you is not what's important to them. And you have to impact. You have to. This is the way I kind of put it. You have to show them that what's important to them is important to you, because it's like have you ever heard of Dean or Dwyer Owens from the Dwyer Group? The Dwyer Group is one of those organizations that has several different franchise brands.
Right.
And it's one of the largest franchise brands. They have Mr. Rooter and Mr. Appliance and ServPro and all these things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And they have this philosophy. They call it the Rich philosophy. And it's respect, integrity, customer focus, and have fun. Right. Well, what was cool about that was when I went and I spoke at their conference in Florida. And in the evening, after all the events were done, I went to the pub at the place there, and I was having dinner, and a bunch of the other franchisees who had come for the event were there. And I walked over and I said to them, I said, why did you choose the Dwyer Group? And their response was, because of the code of values, and it's important for my family. Do you find that right now, especially, there's a big shift in the business world towards values-based business over bottom line chasing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes down to I'm sure you're familiar with Simon Sinek and his whole thing about why, right?
Yep.
And trying to understand the why of things. And that's what the focus really is nowadays. It's not the what we do. It's not how we do it. It's not the where or the when or even the who. It's all about the why. And if people can understand what the why is, what's the mission, what's the important core of this whole thing, that's where the value is. That's exactly
Right.
where it is. There's one of the things that I like to joke around with people, as I ask them about what kind of music they like to listen to. And we talk about the fact that we all have kind of different tastes in music, but we listen to a single radio station. It's an eclectic station and everything plays on it. And that is WIIFM. You got to drop into that bass, baritone radio announcer voice when you say it. WIIFM. And it's obvious. It's an acronym. It stands for What's in It for Me.
Oh,
And we all listen to that radio station because everything we listen to or not listen to is filtered through this. What's in it for me? So if you're watching TV and a commercial comes on, if it's something that you're interested in, or if it intrigues you, you're going to pay attention. If it doesn't, you're tuning out, picking up your phone. You look. The same thing happens with everything else, whether you're listening to your boss, your parents, your kids, whoever it is. They got something that you think is of interest to you, that there's a value for you, there's some value there, you're going to listen. But if not, you're going to tune out. And it's exactly the same thing. So, and I tell people, I said, you're deciding right now, you're deciding whether or not that fat guy in the front of the room has any value for you. And you're either paying attention or checking your email, depending on, or playing solitaire, depending on what value you see.
Right. Well, one of the things I find really interesting when I watch some of your speaking is you and I have a lot in common in the fact that we're not just speakers. We're not the PowerPoint speaker that you always see everywhere.
Oh.
You bring other stuff. You bring entertainment to what you do, right? For me, I use bullwhips and nunchucks and all that stuff, and comedy. You bring comedy and magic and all kinds of things to the table, right?
I do. I mean, I try to teach people, we talked about motivation coming from inside, right? That's our inner torch. That's that fire that burns inside us. And the whole idea behind this fire is that you can share the fire.
Oh, nice.
And if you share the fire, we all can be motivated.
Oh, nice. Well done. Well done.
Go
ahead.
You're absolutely right. We take it the same approach. We want people to be entertained. We want them to laugh. We want them to have a good time. And meanwhile, they're subtly learning something.
Right. And do you find as a speaker that it's the fact that they are laughing and having a good time that they're retaining their content?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I always tell people at the end of every program, I said, remember one thing, and then I walk away. And they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting, and I'll come back and I'll say any one thing. There's this, we just spent an hour together, or a half-day workshop day, or whatever it is, but don't have wasted your time, right? I know you're going to retain something, and everybody will. And I'll go around. I'll say, what did you come away with? And everybody has something different, and almost everything was something that had some sort of an entertainment or humorous point to it, but it drove it home. And for them, it was that little goofy thing. It was maybe the fire inside. Maybe it was, whatever. But it's usually something that had a little entertaining or a little bit of a humor piece to it. But all of a sudden they go, hey, just like, you're probably going to remember, you look nice today.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, no, I'm totally there. I'm telling you, made me feel dirty. I'm telling you, it was bad. I'm kidding. Yeah, it's so interesting. For me, I have clients who tell me that those entertainment anchors, that's what I call them, entertainment anchors. They have content that's wrapped around entertainment, right? I have clients who tell me that, 6 months down the road, they can see that their team is kind of forgetting what we talked about. And they'll say, remember the whip guy? And just saying the whip guy brings it all back, right? So I'm sure it's the same with you. Do you consciously use anchors like that?
It absolutely intentional.
Yeah,
absolutely intentional. When we talk communications, I try to talk about how communication could be simple, right? And there's that old thing you've heard, the old thing called keep it simple, stupid, the KISS principle. Right. Well, that can be insulting because you're calling somebody stupid, So there's a whole other version of that, and it's called the wet paint principle.
The wet paint principle. I don't know.
Wet paint principle. So you painted the wall. You spent hours painting the wall, doing multiple coats, and you're happy with the way it looks, but that paint is still a little bit tacky. You don't want anybody to touch the paint, so you want to put up a sign to keep people away from it. You don't want the sign to say, hey, look, I just painted this wall, and if you touch it, and you're going to get paint on your hands, and it's going to get on your clothes, and you're going to get mad, and you're going to ruin my paint job, and I'm going to upset you. But you got to convey that really quickly before somebody goes, hey, what's this sign say? So what does the sign say? Normally you see a sign, it says wet paint.
Right.
So a lot of times when I'm doing that program, I will give out wet paint signs.
Mm.
So they can hang them up in their office or in their cubicle or at home or wherever, their workshop, and they're constantly reminded of the wet paint principle. And so they go, oh yeah, that's right, I got to shorten this email, I got to clean this up, I got to, whatever it is that they're doing, they think, oh yeah, got to communicate more concisely.
Right. Yeah. It's keep it simple, stupid, like you said, but there's a simple. It's the simple element. I have a good friend named Holly Matson. She's known as the Word Doctor, and Holly, when she talks about working with clients, and she's an editor and she's a proofreader, all this work, um, she and I were talking the other day on one of these interviews, and she said that less is always more. The more precise you can say it, the shorter you can say it, the better it'll be conveyed, unless you're trying to tell a dramatic story. And then you want to get in all the descriptive words and all that stuff. But if you want to convey something, you got to make sure it's fast and quick, because you only have seconds to grab it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when you're doing your programs, do you also do workshops as well?
Oh yeah, I do half day, full day. I've even done some multi days.
Yeah, yeah.
My sweet spot is usually the 2 to 4 hours, depending on the program.
Man,
Um,
I get tired after 4 hours.
you know, I get energized by the crowd. If the crowd's
Yeah.
with me, I'm still going. If the crowd's with me, I'm still going. I draw that energy right from them. That's how I did, working in the shop at the Renaissance Festival for 12-hour days.
Right, right, right. Yeah, you have that gift. I don't. I go in and I give 110%, and then I get just spent. And well, okay. And I don't
I
believe it.
didn't
I
say
don't
it didn't.
believe.
I didn't say it didn't collapse afterward.
Oh, right, right, right. Well, there is that. But I know that you have so much knowledge and so much just information to impart, and I love the fact that you're bringing real content in an entertaining way, but not only just entertaining, but you're bringing it in a way that's so easily digestible. One of the things that I've heard about some of the stuff I do is that they say, um, when John came to speak, he really understood us, and I 100% know that about you. I know that you go in there and you listen first. And in communication, I think listening is always the number one thing,
Absolutely.
and so, like in your case, is there any sort of basic outline that you follow for how to communicate? Tough
Well,
question.
one of the first things I do when I work with any client is really try to understand who they are, what they do, and how they're currently communicating, and what are their current barriers.
Right,
Let's be honest here. People don't look to bring in a motivational speaker if everybody in the organization's happy,
right,
right? People don't need to bring somebody in to do a team building program if the team's all kumbaya.
right,
There are some underlying issues in that organization, which is why they're reaching out to people like this. So, what I do is I usually have multiple conversations with the leadership or the people who are hiring me. Sometimes it's a different level. I'll ask to talk to other people in the organization, get a real feel for how things are going currently and where do they want to go and what those barriers are that are preventing them from getting there. And a lot of that has to do with the communication, how they communicate or not communicate with each other in the organization. And it's so interesting that I find over and over again, and it's almost, I can probably go in with a cookie cutter and figure this out almost every time. It's the leadership has no idea that they are not communicating well to the workforce.
right, right.
So a classic example of that, and I'll tell you, is a job I had when I was working as a civilian for the Navy organization, and they hired me to fill this position that had been vacant for a year and a half.
Mm.
They did not have a communication person for a year and a half. And this was it was the Navy Public Works Center, so it was primarily civilian blue collar workers, plumbers, carpenters, painters, machinists, shop mechanics, air conditioning repair, those guys. And it was led by a handful of military engineers.
Right.
Okay. They would put, the leadership would put out an email to the organization. 70% of their people weren't on email, didn't have computers for their jobs. They reported in, they picked up their toolbox, they got the list of what assignments they had to go out, the Admiral's plumbing or whatever, the lights are out in this building, whatever it is, and off they go on their assignments, never to be seen again until the end of the day when they turn in their tools. Some of them were actually worked out of their vehicle. The toolbox stayed in their truck, and they would get a call in the morning telling them where to go for their first assignment. The leadership had no clue why nobody was paying attention to what was going on in the organization. Of course, military folks would cycle in every 2 or 3 years.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Cycle in and cycle out. These guys, the workforce was there 30 years. These civilians that had been there forever. And what had happened was the previous communication officer had transferred out. He took another job and went elsewhere. And they said, we don't need to fill that position. We're doing fine. We'll just keep going the way, we'll just keep doing this stuff. Well, there was the 10th anniversary of the organization. They were having a big shindig. And there was going to be, several admirals were coming to speak, and the Navy band was going to be there.
Oh, no.
And they put it out to the workforce. We want maximum participation. Obviously, if you're on duty in the power plant, you can't come, or if you're driving a shuttle bus, you can't come, but everybody who can, we want to be there. 600 employees. They're expecting a large audience at the Navy Yard for this big function. When nobody showed up, they ran people around the inside of the building and grabbed like every, office person they could find. They managed to get about 18 people.
Oh, my God.
And 600 chairs.
Oh, my God.
Navy band, 3 admirals. It was so embarrassing. And they realized something went entirely wrong there. Well, here's what went wrong. And here's what the senior leadership didn't know. They told the mid-level managers, and they told those folks told the shop supervisors. And by the time it got down to the workforce, it was, hey, they're planning some big thing over at headquarters. You can go if you want to, but you got to make up the time.
They played telephone way down. Yeah.
Beautiful, classic example. Example. So when I went in, one of the things I did was I created some focus groups, and I just took people out of the shops, and I said, hey, let's sit down and figure out what's going wrong here. And they were like, yeah, we don't even know who these people are.
Right.
So I took the senior leaders and I said, look, we're going to go visit every shop, and we're going to talk to folks. We have some FaceTime, and they thought that was like insane. And it was funny. These blue collar guys, they didn't pull any punches. One guy sat back like this, and after the commander finished talking about kind of the way ahead for the new year and all this other stuff and the direction for the organization, he's sitting there like this the whole time. And he looks up and he goes, "Who the hell are you? And why should we listen to you?"
Oh man! Oh my gosh!
Big eye opener. Big eye opener right there.
Oh yeah. It's interesting. I spoke, I guess it was 2 years ago. I spoke for an organization here in Cleveland, and I wish I could have talked to you before I spoke to them, because what's really interesting is I went into the space and I could tell when I walked in the space, just like when I walked into your shop, it felt great. When I walked into their space, it felt terrible. It was angry. That was the way it sounded. It felt right. And they sold windows. My wall moving. They sold windows, and the owners was 2 brothers, I believe. They were angry, bitter people, and to believe that all of their salesmen need to be, aggressively competing with each other. And I mean, and I was hearing stories about this guy needed to outsell that guy, and so he was telling people at their houses, "Boy, I replaced these windows before you have a fire." So he was using like fear tactics to sell windows, right? And the more I worked with them for 4 hours, and I did a speech, and then I did a workshop, and the more I worked with them all day long, I did on their feet things where they're doing emotional things, emotional intelligence work, and all day long, just getting this whole angry sense. So if you had this, I said somebody after that, I said, I don't believe that company will be around long. And I noticed recently that they used to be the top window place around here, and now none of their commercials play on radios anymore. And so I think they're gone. I think they're on the way out. But if you walked into a situation where you immediately felt that sort of aggressive, competitive, angry environment, what's the first thing you attack?
Wow.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah. Part of me says, run. No.
Well, it's hard. It's hard when it's the boss who's doing it.
No, I know, and it's so challenging. I've worked with organizations that had morale issues, only to find out that the morale issue was caused exactly by the boss, or even worse, the person who hired me to come in and fix it.
Right.
And so you can't go in there and just start pointing fingers and go, you're the problem. But depending on the relationship and the contract in which you're being hired, we're going to have those one-on-ones with the boss afterward.
Right.
But the general session is really sometimes enlightening to try to figure out, and you watch how people are reacting to different things that you're doing and different exercises that you're doing with them. And it's usually can be very telling of how things are going and where the problems really are lying. So then you get them to make suggestions about how to make improvements in the organization without pointing fingers.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So you're eliciting them to communicate it rather than you trying to communicate.
I would actually do this as a facilitated workshop rather than a keynote speech or lecture. But it depends on the organization. And if they hired me to come in and do a keynote, I could come in and do a keynote about the best leadership and kinds of organizations, and it'll make them feel worse about themselves because they don't meet up to that requirement, right? Or they'll be turning around looking at the boss going, listen to this guy.
Right.
So it's really, you've got to tailor it. So, I may all of a sudden kind of modify it and talk about work-life balance or dealing with change or something else. But I walked into an organization, and the one thing that they were having a huge morale problem. They did one of those employee surveys, and it just tanked. And they didn't know what the problem was, but they know they needed somebody to come in and talk to them. And they brought me in for a 2-day workshop. Now, it's that bad. You want to bring in a motivational speaker to work with you for a 2-day workshop. All right. So over the course of the 2 days, I facilitated some exercises to kind of open up the organization, get them talking, and try to figure out what were causing some of the issues. Well, as it turns out, it was the organization provided a service to their larger company. All right, this was a certain unit that provided expert advice in a certain area. Actually, they were legal. And so they provided legal counsel to the rest of the organization. But they kept saying, we're here to serve you. We are a service. We're at your service. We're serving you. What happened was they started being treated like servants.
Oh.
They weren't treated like expert advisors. They were treated like servants who were there. They went in, they heard, people would go ask for the service. They would get the legal review. The legal review would say no. They'd get ignored and walk away because the customer didn't get what they wanted. What kind of a service organization are you? You're not serving me. You're not getting me where I need to be. So So working with them over the next, that was in the first day, was when that kind of came to fruition and enlightenment. Over the second day, we worked on how they could better frame what they do, how they can better refer to themselves, how can they better market themselves. They no longer call themselves a servant organization, but they call themselves expert advice. In 6 months' time, they completely turned around. Completely turned around because they thought of themselves differently. Other people thought of them differently. And it goes back to kind of the core to all of this. They didn't feel like they mattered before. Now they matter.
Right.
And that's the core. That's the gist of everything that I try to teach, is that people just want to matter. And that really is the essence of every problem that we have in society right now. People feeling like they don't matter to others.
How do you instill that confidence in somebody, in an audience member, or you go into a place and you're having someone who believes they're a servant? How do you change their inner core belief about that from a communication standpoint?
It's really interesting. I usually will try a bunch of different exercises with folks, and it kind of goes back to if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
It's the same thing. And so I intentionally will pull people out of the audience that look like they are trying to hide in their seats. And I'll get them to come up and participate and be part of things, or I will team them up with other folks as well. And I will prohibit the dominant personalities in the room from taking over or from doing things. And I actually learned this when I was in the Navy, and I was doing training for public affairs officers. And there was an international group, and for some reason, the Canadian the Canadian military public affairs folks were just dead on sharp, man. They would volunteer for every assignment, and they were good at everything. And so I actually would have to shut them down. I was okay. I need somebody to volunteer to take on this assignment. I need somebody to volunteer to respond to this report or whatever it was. And I would look at the Canadian guys and go, but not you. You have to go sit on your hands. Just you can't do it. And I would give those other people an opportunity. That's how I've always worked with all of my career. I mean, I've been in the communication field for 40 years, between Navy and government, and state government, and in federal government. And so I've worked with a lot of different folks. And one of the things that I always tried to do was to allow people to grow, allow them to try something that they didn't think they were capable of doing, and take away the fear of failure. And that's the most important thing. And so when I'm working with a group and there's that person that doesn't seem to have the confidence, or if I'm finding that they don't think of themselves in a strong way, we remove the fear of failure. Take that fear of failure away. And that comes, like, I don't know if you've ever participated in Toastmasters.
I did not.
So Toastmasters is an organization that helps people to improve their public speaking and leadership skills. And it is a very encouraging, very supportive, safe environment. You are encouraged to come in and fail. You're encouraged to come in and deliver an icebreaker speech and tell us about yourself in 4 to 6 minutes. And we don't care if you stammer, you stutter, if you and ah, you're the Wizard of Oz, whatever it is that it is. We're here to help point out to you the things that you're doing right, and help encourage you to take the next step. Right. And it's the same thing with every group. Get somebody out there, show them what they're doing right, compliment them, give them the support they need to try the things that they do. And I think that's just like what you do with your programs, and getting people to crack that whip and snap that thing out of your hand.
That pretzel stick out of my hand.
The pretzel, thank you. I'm sitting going, da.
When I directed Renaissance festivals, I developed a reputation for being the guy you bring in when you want to save your show. I literally would be brought in because the show was failing and there was a bad place, and I would come in and I would work with them for a few weeks and not change anything, and just come in and see what was going on.
Yes.
And then, I directed South Florida, North Florida, Tennessee, and a show here in Ohio. And what I found really interesting was in that work environment, in the actors are dingy anyway. Um, are you hearing something?
No, I'm laughing.
Okay, okay. So yeah, I've been an actor for years. I'm pretty dingy, but
Your
when
words.
yeah. When I discovered that you would find a hierarchy, and the people who were everybody looked up to as the best actor or the best character or the best whatever, that a lot of times their ego was such that they were keeping everybody else down because everybody else was thinking they couldn't be as good as them. And a lot of times I would fire the top third of the cast. And then what would happen was I would get rid of that one person, and that one person I would suddenly have 5 people who were so much stronger because they didn't have the limitations of that person. And do you find that when you go in to work with an organization and they have that sort of hierarchical communication, do you find that hierarchy itself can be a limitation?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing worse than a hierarchy, actually. And
Right.
you reminded me of how I learned to play chess.
Oh.
Seriously, when I first was starting to play chess, I had a very heavy dependence on the queen because she was so powerful and can move in all different directions. And so I relied very heavily. Once my queen was captured, I lost every game. If I had allowed my queen to get captured, I couldn't play. So some friends of mine who were trying to help me improve would take my queen off the board from the start of the game.
Mm.
I'm forced to play with the lesser players in my mind. And I found their strengths. And it's
Right.
the same thing. So, and it was the same thing when I took the Canadian folks out of the game when we did the war games. When I took them out, everybody else had that chance to shine. But
Everybody else
when
got better.
there's a hierarchy, when there's an ego that's in the way, man, kind of the crux of everything that I'm about goes to that saying that you don't have to blow out my candle to make yours burn brighter.
Mm. Perfect.
We all
Perfect.
can shine.
Right.
We all can shine. And when I was a supervisor, or when I was president of the National Association of Government Communicators, the whole time was about making other people better. And when I look back at my military career, I stayed on the enlisted side. Okay, I retired as a Master Chief Journalist in the Navy Reserve, and I had an opportunity a couple of times to switch over to the officer corps, but I actually preferred to stay on the enlisted side and through the chief petty officer ranks, where I could be that mentor kind of thing for folks. And I look back at so many people that were junior enlisted people to me that at my retirement ceremony stood up there as officers, acknowledging the fact that I not only didn't stand in their way, I pushed their butts out there and
There you go.
got them ahead. Now, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's the way I learned. Now, you're gonna laugh when I say where I learned it from, and it's from monster movies.
Oh, really?
Remember I told you I was the little guy in school?
Yeah.
I was a little guy. I was shy because every time I opened my mouth, I was picked on by bullies, right? And I always had a sense of humor, but I wasn't allowed to practice it because if I drew attention to myself, it'd be another beating or meet me outside after school kind of thing. And I used to read comic books like all kids my age in the 70s and such, and I was like, oh yeah, I wish I had a superpower, man. I would teach them, man. But I knew I wasn't going to get bitten by a radioactive spider, or I wasn't going to get hit by gamma rays or whatever. That doesn't really happen. But I found new inspiration in watching monster movies. And in the monster movies, no matter how big or how bad or how nasty the monster was, the little guy won.
Right.
And the little guy won because he was given the opportunity to try something different. He was given the opportunity to be innovative. The little guy wasn't always the commander in charge of the military force. Usually it was some sergeant or some civilian or it wasn't always the person in charge. And I watched that and I went, yeah, that's true. You can do that. If you're given the chance, if that door is opened for you, if you're given the latitude to be creative, to be innovative, to maybe develop some new collaborations and partnerships, you can succeed.
Right.
And so again, I took my inspiration from monster movies, which is where I got the whole thing with the villagers with torches and that thing. I don't know if you mentioned that, but the whole concept is that when you wanted to chase the monsters away, you got the villagers together and they lit their torches and chased the monster away. Now, in today's society, you think villagers with torches and you kind of flash back to the insanity that happened in Capitol Hill the other day. Right. That's not what I mean by mob mentality, villagers with torches. Villagers with torches are a bunch of people that are inspired and motivated.
Right.
And that goes back to that having your inner fire that burns and then sharing that fire with others and allowing them for their individual fires to also burn.
Right. I know, John, that you and I both agree that whatever happened the other day in Washington was a tragedy and a travesty. And, we both, I'm sure, pray for the well-being of our country right now. I have to say, I've after seeing your stuff and knowing you, I'm always so impressed by what you bring and what you deliver. Where can people find you? What's your website? How can we get all that stuff? What is it?
Absolutely. It's really easy. johnverrico.com is my website. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can't say I'm hiding because I'm out there everywhere.
Be bad for a communications guy to be hiding. So, well, John, thank you so much for this today. This was amazing, and I'm so glad that we ever.
And don't forget my phone number. Right, is 224. Good Lord, I just forgot it. 240-257-NERD.
There you go. Nice.
Because
nice.
I was a little nerdy guy,
And I'll put that right on the screen somewhere.
Yep. Do that.
Well, John, it has been awesome. We've done almost an hour here.
Wow, and, that's amazing. Well, you get two Renaissance Festival guys together, and we start to jaw. So I will leave this one thought, and this. I call myself a torchbearer. I talked about our inner torch and our inner fire, right? Torch is more than just this symbol. It's also my acronym, and it stands for how the things that we need in order to be motivated and to keep each other motivated, and that is trust, opportunity, respect, communication, and humanity.
Nice.
When you're treated with those things, your torch can stay lit, and your fire is burning.
Excellent. Well, guys, that is John Verrico. And if your company out there is in need of really communicating and bonding and coming together to create new and better things and to create the better world that John's talking about, make sure you go to johnverrico.com, check him out, make sure that you bring him into your organization. It's important because your environment that is communicating cleanly and clearly and creating that space like John did all those years ago when I walked into that hat shop. That's important. That's what you want. And so make sure you go out there and check out John Verrico and hire him and bring him in. And thanks again, John.
Hey, thank you, John. It's always great to see you.
All right, I'll see you. Bye-bye.
Take care.